Kick it to the block.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful performance. Thank you all for being with us. I just wanted to introduce now our next session. We're going to be considering the road to UNOC. I'm Melissa Bell, CNN's correspondent here in Paris. We have a panel and a fireside chat coming up, and the idea is to look ahead to the climate conference, of course, of next month that'll be held in Nice. As you know, this is about the UN's third ocean conference. All of this, of course, is about those famous goals that were set in 2015, very ambitious, the Sustainable Goals of 2030. Number 14 is about the oceans, and the subject of our panel and our fireside chat is going to be looking at where we are today, how much more there is to do ahead of that very ambitious 2030 agenda, and whether or not UNOC, when it is held in Nice next month, can deliver on any of that. So we'll be considering that with our panelists and then with a couple of special guests. But first, please, here's a message, first of all, from Sylvia Earle. You'll know her, of course, as the marine biologist, the explorer. She was also Time magazine's first ever Hero of the Planet back in 1998. Here's what she has to say.
I'm Sylvia Earle, an oceanographer and explorer who, during a lifetime of diving into the ocean as a scientist, have been a witness to the most extraordinary time in all of human history, that we have prospered from 2 billion people when I was a child to now 8 billion people, but there's been a cost. We have consumed nature to create wealth, and here we are. We're just at the point where nature could consume us by shifting to a different state that is not favorable to our species. So, imagine if we did not know where we're at, to see that we have about 5 years to fulfill the vision, to fulfill the goal of protecting at least 30% of the land and 30% of the ocean as a milestone toward really making peace, harmony with nature. We know what to do to find our place within the natural systems that make our existence possible. What we need now is the will, the commitment to go from where we are to a safe place. It is achievable. We do know what to do. The science is there. I really appeal to you to use what you have. Every one of you has power to do something, to change this trajectory with the decisions you make every day and the commitments that you make to be a part of the solution. This, as never before, is a time when we should be excited about making this transition from consuming nature to being able to give back to nature, to restore the damage we've inflicted and have a safe home for ourselves within this mostly blue planet. Thank you.
It's quite a hopeful call, all in all, with just 5 years to go. But we have consumed nature, and it is nature that might now consume us. I'd like to call up to the stage my first panelists, Joachim Claudet, who is a research director at the CNRS, also DANIELA FERNANDEZ, the founder of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance, a network of young ocean actors, but who's also now creating a new ocean venture, of which we will hear more these next few weeks, and Nicolas Entrup, who's the director of international relations at OceanCare. Do please come and join. Thank you. Do sit down. So DANIELA FERNANDEZ that I just mentioned, Joachim Claudet, and Nicolas Entrup, thank you so much for joining us and for being with us on this important panel. We don't have much time, so we're going to race through as much as we can. First of all, ahead of this conference on the oceans in June, what is the urgency that the world should deal with the oceans, to each of you? How grave is the crisis?
Well, where to begin? And I think that this is the problem, that we don't have enough time. And as we heard from Sylvia Earle, there's actually 5 years left. And yet we are sitting on the sidelines looking at the ocean as if it's a spectator sport. When the reality is that although governments are going to be the ones that are going to be playing a very big role, civil society, the private sector, us as individuals, we have an enormous role to play as well. And yet the pressure is not being felt right now. It's not being felt right now by the entities who are going to be at the UN Ocean Conference, not being felt by the corporations who are actually in charge of making these changes. And so what I ask of you, and I actually want you to raise your hand, do you know that only 8% of the ocean is actually protected? If you knew this, raise your hand.
Wow.
Of that, only 2.5 is actually enforced. Raise your hand. Raise them high. Come on. We're trying to figure this out. Okay. Did you also know that 0.01 of climate financing actually goes to the ocean? Who knew that?
I did not.
So we are in a crisis mode, and this is not just for this one UN Ocean Conference. This crisis is a crisis for humanity and for our lifetime. And so as we're starting these conversations, I really just want all of us to wake up and to understand that it's our fate that's at stake right now. So as we think about what are the promises that these governments have, a lot of these promises are voluntary promises. They're not even legally binding promises. There's not a lot of time, and so I just want to start off and kick off the conversation by sharing that.
And we're very grateful, and we're going to come back to exactly those promises and the pledges and the more binding things that should or might come out of the forthcoming conferences. I'd love to get your view on exactly that, Joachim Claudet, how urgent this is, and responding to what Daniela just said. I did not know any of those figures, by the way, and I find them astonishing, as you must.
Well, it is urgent for many reasons. First, we do depend on the ocean for well-being. Even if we live in a city like Paris, far from the coast, the ocean is contributing to climate regulation, it's providing food, it's providing shelter, it's coastal protection, a lot of benefits to people, to societies. but our human footprint on the ocean has never been that large. There's no place in the ocean that is not impacted by human activities. And what we call the blue economy, the economy that is related to the ocean, is increasing at a worrying pace. And there is the 100 largest businesses that deals with the ocean. They concentrate 65% of the total revenues. So there are a lot. There's a clear equity issues in the ocean. And we know many of the solutions. We know what to do. We know how to manage the ocean. We know how to do everything more sustainably. But we are driven by short-term interest. And so we need to implement a shift, a transformative change to think more on the medium to long term.
Because in the meantime, Nicolas Entrup, and this is one of your areas of specialty, tremendous harm is being done, not just by things like deep sea exploration, but by the prospection, even to consider where the resources might be. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's absolutely right. I think the audience, some of you may recall, when you look 15 years back, there was a situation when you were staring at the TV screen, helpless, apathic, watching the Deepwater Horizon oil spill to take place. Hundreds of millions of liters of oil were spilled into the Gulf of Mexico and doing harm, resulting in hundreds of thousands of dead animals, seabirds, dolphins, turtles, etc. The scope of the area was around 150,000 square kilometers. That's 3 times Switzerland and even more. But today, it's out of your mind. 15 years later, science is still looking at the impacts on population level, declines of beaked whales, of sperm whales, of bottlenose dolphins, those charismatic species, but at the same time impacting on the marine ecosystem and the socioeconomic impacts on tourism in the area. But this is the visual impact we are talking about when you think about the oil industry. But every day there is another impact. And I would like to invite you for a very brief exercise. Imagine the ocean is an acoustic world. And acoustic sound is very important to orientate, to communicate, to find prey. But when you search for oil and gas, you imply air guns within seismic surveys, where explosive pulses are emitted every 10 seconds for 24 hours a day, weeks or even months, impacting from the smallest animal, krill, to the largest animal, whales. And this is happening for searching for new fossil fuels in this situation. When we have an Agenda 2030, when we have the Paris Agreement in place, they go in deeper areas, in protected areas, and this is the state we have today.
Wow. So that is an astonishing thing to imagine. That is that 10 years on from 2015 and all that hope that there was and the sense that the world was together, things continue to get worse and continue to be done, the harm of which is only beginning to be measured. How can that change? Daniela, what is the key?
Well, the first opportunity is really at the UN Ocean Conference, because this is a milestone event where not only are we going to look at governments to ratify the BV&J Treaty, number one, which again, we need to protect that 60% of the ocean that's outside of national jurisdiction. We have to create a legally binding plastics treaty. We're about to triple the amount of plastic going into the ocean, triple. And yet we're still waiting for nations to come up with some type of policy. We need to put a moratorium on deep seabed mining. We also need to bring a $3.5 trillion of economics to the blue economy. And so these are massive challenges that we have ahead of ourselves. And this is what we're looking at the UN Ocean Conference to understand and figure out all of these aspirations that we have, how soon will they become reality? And where is the financing going to come from? Where is the political will going to come from? And more importantly, what are each and every one of you doing to support this? And I'm looking at all of us, right? Because this is not just about pointing the finger at them, at the governors, at the politicians. It's about us. How are we taking that responsibility upon ourselves to actually say, how am I doing my part? So I do think that UNOC is one very important step. However, there's also the need for continuity. And I'll just give one example. There is actually going to be the Ocean Rise Coastal Resilience Summit that is going to be happening at UNOC. And what I'm really excited is that not only will that summit happen there, and it's going to be for local governors, for local authorities to take action. Because local populations are the ones being affected, and they have the opportunity to act in an immediate way. But not only would that summit happen, there's also a coalition that's attached to that for the work to continue and building on momentum. So I do think that UNOC may be a milestone to reach, but then we have to ask ourselves, what happens next? What happens in the next 5 years?
Joachim, what is your answer to that?
My answer is that we need to understand that there's a lot of things we don't know yet about the ocean. So we need more science, we need more knowledge. That is for sure. But we need to accept that science is not anymore the limiting factor for the fact that we don't take action. And we scientists who work on sustainability issues, we are we have a kind of fatigue to go from one conference to another, to hear government committing always to the same thing and saying, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that from one conference to another, and never do anything in between. And so there's many things that we know how to do them, we know how to implement them, the commitments are there, the CBD, BBNJ will be ratified, and so we need a shift now in how things are done. We need more accountability in commitments, we need those things to be binding, and we need to stop running after event and event, because yes, UNOC is an important milestone. Yes, we need to expect a lot from UNOC, but we need to expect even more from the recognition that we need to change in how we deal with the ocean. There's no technical fix that needs to be expected. It's only in how our societies will realize that we do depend on a healthy environment for our well-being, and that there is multiple dimensions to well-being. One is economic, for sure. There's no problem about that. But we can have sustainable development. But our well-being is also spiritual. It's also health. And every part of this is tied to a healthy environment. We need biodiversity for our development, and we need to enter the sustainability trajectory because we don't have more time.
Picking up, Nicolas, on what Joachim was just saying, it's true. The science is there. The awareness is there, much more than it was, say, 10 years ago amongst most people, of our link to nature and the need to improve it and respect and so on. What is the issue then with turning this into tangible things, obligations, the kind of binding agreements that we've been talking about so far? Is it the silos that exist between countries? Is it the silos that exist between scientific communities and politicians? What is it?
Okay, I think you touch upon the crucial point, because there is one additional element to that we do have decisions in place. The 2030 agenda you're referring to and why UNOC will take place is about checking, are we on track? Isn't SDG 14 about preventing and reducing pollution, all forms of pollution? Yes, it is. Isn't SDG 13 about climate action? Yes, it is. Isn't the Paris Agreement about a shift in the energy sector and energy sector transformation? Yes, it is. So why on earth do we still either not implement action or allow practices and activities to continue? And this is why we've teamed up. We've got support from more than 100 NGOs around the world from 6 continents, calling governments on to commit to ban oil and gas exploration in the ocean. That's not a very bright and brave and radical ask. That's just an inconsistent ask to go forward to UNOC. And you can still support it, because I can tell you the draft declaration does not include it. So 1 month to go, and we need to change that. We need to change that now. So I bring in the title of the conference again.
But Daniela, that is such a perfect example of something that is like manifestly in everybody's interest and a no-brainer, right? And that a number of governments could have implemented. Why not? What is the thing that makes it so difficult to make binding commitments to? Is it the pressure that comes from industry? Is it the difficulty of governments working together? Or the inability of the different actors to get together to put the necessary pressure?
Well, the first problem is that the ocean actually has a terrible PR agent. Because when we talk about the ocean, it's often left to the side. When we talk about climate, there's a lot of funding going to climate, a lot of energy going to climate. And so first of all, we need to have a lot more understanding of what's at stake if the ocean fails. And like Sylvia Earle says, there's no ocean, there's no green, there's no us, right? And I do think that, for example, right, at the UN Ocean Conference, I hope CNN will be there covering it. You know,
I'm planning to, yes.
We will welcome you there. And I think we just need more people to understand why the ocean matters and how they can play a role and how they can help. And then they have to put pressure on their respective governments, corporations, you know, build their own solutions to make this work. So I do think that there's a big disconnect in the work that we're doing in the ocean space very actively and the work that people actually are aware of. And then there's also the problem, like, what do you do, right? There is so much climate anxiety that's happening right now all over the world, especially this next generation. Because collectively, every single one of us in this room, especially the next generation, we are the last generation to be able to do something to solve this crisis. I'm gonna repeat that again because I have to let that sink in for a minute. Like, us living in this time, in this moment, we are the last generation to be able to prevent catastrophe. And we have 5 years to prevent catastrophe from happening. So no pressure, but all the pressure is actually on our shoulders. And I think it goes back to how are you yourselves up-leveling your own ambitions and the work that you're doing in your collective industries?
Given that urgency, and I think that's a great way of framing it, Daniela, that it's up to us or it's not going to happen. And I'm curious then, Joachim, what you think then of UNOC and the difference it will make, and whether there is any hope that we'll begin to get the kind of binding commitments that we need to be making the urgent progress that needs to happen on this issue.
The thing that needs to happen is really the recognition of that the time of nature is different from the time of politics. In most of the countries, not all obviously, but the electoral mandate are 4 to 5 years. And in most of those countries, people can be re-elected once, and so it's 10 years. Okay, the maximum someone in charge can. But for example, let's take the example of marine protected areas, which are a space that's a delimited space in the ocean where you regulate human activities to ensure you reduce or eliminate the impact on biodiversity, so ecosystem can regenerate or restore themselves. It is very quick inside this marine protected area for nature to thrive again, but it takes a little bit more than 10 years for them to be effective outside of their boundaries. And so the benefits of those interventions sometimes don't happen during the mandate of the politician, and this is what needs to be changed. We need to think about cost benefits on a longer term, transgenerational, and stop thinking that, sustainability is difficult because on the short term we have losers. We need to change. So we have losers on the short term. We need to change some practices, but on the medium to long term, everyone wins. And so we need this shift in perspective of that the time of nature is different from the time of politics.
That's a really interesting point. And on that, Nicolas, the question of, if you think back to 2015 and all the enthusiasm, the commitments we've talked about, the fact that the whole world signed on to them and everyone was aware and all this was going to happen in the next 15 years, and how far behind we are, do you feel that things are going in the right or the wrong direction? I suppose it's an easy question to answer.
Okay, well, I was told I have to be optimistic here, so I will go for that option. But I think there are 3 very, very big issues at stake at the UNOC in June. First of all, trust. How do you want to expect people to give trust in decision makers if they adopt decisions which they will always fail? So it's at risk that decision makers live up to the targets they set themselves. That's number 1. Number 2, science. We have to listen to science. It's out there, it's there. And if we need to know more, fine. But we have the precautionary principle in place, and we should have a protection principle in place, which is now in discussion to be developed. And third, and probably this is for the current days, the most important one is multilateralism. It's the belief in, if we want to protect this planet, we need to unify, we need to collaborate. And there is a trend, we don't need to name the elephant in the room, and there are more of those, that we need to expect leaders to stand up, to take the lead. Europe, take the lead. Don't wait for Santa Claus. Yes. You know, the small island nations, team up, bring other opportunities there, and be bright. And last word is, there are so many passionate negotiators out there that needs to be congratulated because they do a fine job.
very briefly to each of the two of you, what tangibly, concretely do you want to see come out of this conference? And we'll put that to our next guests in the fireside chat, Daniela, and then to you, Joachim. What needs to happen in Nice in June?
I would say number one, we have to have integration of civil society. You know, I founded Sustainable Ocean Alliance because I fundamentally believe that young people really have to be part of these conversations and bring about solutions. Number two, we need to finance everything that we're talking about, right? No matter how many commitments that are made, or no matter how many, 1,001 billion ocean startups that exist out there, if they can't get their next round of funding, I mean, just looking back behind us, there's so many solutions out there, but they're all looking for capital. Where is that capital going to be coming from? So that's number two. Number three, it's legally binding action. Voluntary commitments don't mean anything. A voluntary commitment can be made by any corporation, by any government, and that could go away because budgets change or because a new politician comes in the door. So I do think that legally binding action is necessary. And the last piece of it all is awareness. Let's make the ocean famous. Let's make the ocean sexy. Let's make the ocean something that people can actually get behind and understand. Because if we don't do that now, we're going to be speaking into the void.
And finally, Joachim, to you, the same.
Yeah, what I would say is that many of the objectives and targets that we already have from previous COP, the CBD COP, climate COPs, are good. They've been informed by science, they've been negotiated through multilateralism, and they're good. So we don't need yet new ones. We would, once they would be reached, but we need to start implementing them effectively, which is not the case yet. So we need to implement effectively what we have already committed to do.
Okay, it sounds nice and simple, and we'll ask our next guests whether they think that's likely. Thank you so much to all three of you for being with us and for a fascinating chat. Thank you. So I'd like to call to the stage now our next guests, and I'm thinking here of Kevin Taillé-Ballet, who is the co-founder of ChangeNOW, and he's going to come up and make a special announcement to us, and also to the stage Ashok Adicéam, who is the French General Delegate for UNOC, and also the Deputy Special Presidential Envoy. Please help me welcome them. Bonjour. Je commençais à me demander si vous alliez venir ou pas. Je suis ravie. Bonjour. Thank you so much. Thank you. You'll make an announcement then, first of all.
That's right.
Thank you. So lovely to meet you. Come and sit down. So first of all, to you, you are the co-founder then of ChangeNOW, and you have something to announce to us today.
That's right, Melissa. Thanks for having us. So I'm truly honored to be sitting with you on stage with Ashok Adicéam, representing the United Nations Ocean Conference, to share a major step towards the ocean today with you. So ChangeNOW was created with the mission of uniting the world of innovators, of investors, of policymakers, of businesses around our major goals. For the next 3 days, we're welcoming 40,000 participants, 10,000 companies, more than 1,000 solutions, 2,000 investors, a lot of decision makers as well. And basically, those numbers are very powerful, but what truly matters is what we make with them. And we believe that this year it's a very important edition because one of the key milestones of ChangeNOW 2025 is really to be a platform that helps prepare the UN Ocean Conference that will be happening in Nice and Monaco in June. And that's the reason why we've designed this week around, with a very specific ocean agenda. We have, you may have seen it, 1,000 square meter village of solutions to preserve the oceans right outside on the banks of the Seine River. We've got many conferences on the topic. We have working groups and curated meetings to align the efforts across sectors. Tonight we have an ocean night prepared with all the key actors of the ecosystem. And basically all of this reflects the role of ChangeNOW, which is to build bridges. To build bridges around important causes. And I think that's one that is missing currently in the ocean ecosystem, is the one that is linking capital with solutions. You've heard Daniela say it before. There's less than 0.01% of capital of climate funding that is actually going to the oceans. There is actually less than 1% of philanthropic capital going to the ocean causes in the world today. So we need to address that point and rally not only the governments, but also the private sector, the private capital on this major topic. And because governments and NGOs, they can't do it alone. And citizens can't do it alone. So we need pretty much everyone on deck at the moment. And so there will be a very important moment on the 7th of June at the Blue Economy and Finance Forum in Monaco, where a lot of important governments, decision makers from all leaders, companies, funders will gather to make significant commitments, funding commitments to the blue economy, to ensure that the voice of impact and impact investors and philanthropists is really loud and clear around those commitments. And I think, Ashok, you have some things to say about that.
Yes, please. Ashok.
To you, Melissa.
No, please. So thank you so much, first of all, for that. But we have a bunch of questions. And I should have specified, by the way, that we're going to be opening questions up to the floor for anyone who might have questions for Ashok. But we have a number of things to cover first that we picked up from the panel, which is what we can expect from UNOC. What are your hopes?
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you, Kevin, for inviting us. Us is the French government I'm representing here. It's also the United Nations. We are organizing for the United Nations this 3rd edition of UNOC that's happening in Nice for the proper UN conference from the 9th to the 13th. And you're right, just before, in Monaco, 30 minutes from Nice, we have proposed to Monaco to co-organize with France this Blue Economy and Finance Forum 2 days before, 7th and 8th. Why? Because we believe that this conference first has to be a conference of action. And there's no action without money. And so the objective of the Blue Economy and Finance Forum is to gather the stakeholders, both from the private and the public sector, like 2,000 stakeholders, and to do exactly what you're doing here, is to gather the stakeholders and to have not only meetings and brainstormings, but rather come with commitments. You said the word. So we have been mobilizing for 2 years now, all the stakeholders in the different countries, in the different UN agencies. We have been bringing together coalitions like the Finance in Common Coalition, which brings the World Bank and the New Development Bank, Washington and Shanghai together, brings all sorts of private equity coalitions, insurance coalitions. We're working very closely with AXA, who's one of our sponsors, and I know was very active in your ChangeNOW forum, to come with specifics on specific thematics. And I'm very happy to have heard the priorities laid out by the panel before on conservation, on high seas, on fishing, and all this with concrete geographies and to bring really the stakeholders on board in the decisions, in the commitments, and in the financing. I won't get into too much of details into that. Of course, between the North and the South, we know that there's a lot of expectations, more than hopes. But what we have tried to do with Pascal Lamy, who's the co-chair of this Blue Economy and Finance Forum, the former Director General of WTO, is to come with 3 layers of or 3 work streams. One is initiatives, which are finance initiatives, and we have come already with 10 billion projects which are going to be presented at BEF in Monaco. 10 billion for a certain number of projects. It's not big, but it's concrete. The second is these initiatives of multi-stakeholders joining together, public and private, and we hope to bring together 100 billion euros through these coalitions. The big one, that was an easy one, being the maritime transport. You're speaking about change now and transition here. The maritime transport is engaging into decarbonization with both the public sector, the UN with the IMO, which has come to an agreement, which in the next 10 years will invest 10 billions every year. So from now till 2035, there's 100 billion which are going to be brought for decarb, and specifically I told you about geographies, addressing the small development islands and the south, the global south. And that's very concrete. And the last point in these layers, in these work streams, is what we are doing now and going to engage. With my colleagues who are here today, we have worked with Monaco, with Bloomberg, with Oceano Azul Foundation for months now to coalesce philanthropists, and there are a lot in the room, and investors. There's even more in the room, and you're part of those investors and you have that background, in a new coalition which is going to be called Philanthropists and Investors in Ocean, PIO. The objective of this coalition is to have a mapping of these philanthropies, like Bloomberg, who has been investing for years now in resilience in coastal communities, to know where are the needs, but where also are the boulevard of opportunities in this transition. Because we believe that the ocean is not only a victim, the ocean is part of a solution, and a huge solution. We're speaking about trillions of investment possible. And that's the reason why we believe that professionals like you in ChangeNOW, with your network, we can engage, we can even marry. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. But let's engage now. We'll marry in Monaco. That's even more romantic.
Not sure how either of your wives are going to feel about this, but yes.
We're just speaking about it. And we have Indian origins in common, by the way. To bring the networks which are here, the investors and the philanthropists, to bring the networks of these big foundations I mentioned together, and to do a proper mapping of the investments now, with what they are doing as philanthropists, for the investors to see what is bankable. Because we know that the investors, they're not philanthropists, but we want these two communities to engage in a dialogue and a collective mobilization. And that's what we want to do with ChangeNOW.
That is fascinating. Please, Kevin, before we open up the floor.
I mean, the mapping is really important because if once you know who invests in what amounts on what topics, you're able to actually create a connection between the capital and actually the solutions that are deployed. You have so many of them actually at ChangeNOW here working on, basically, corals preservation or depollution, plastic depollution, and ecosystem restoration. So basically, what's interesting is to have that ecosystemic view of basically which investors are funding, what amounts, and on what kind of channels. And once you're able to do that, you're able to drive that capital and deploy it over the next few years on the solutions. That's what we intend to do, and that's the reason why we need you guys, we need all of you, all the philanthropists, all the investors that plan to make an investment by 2030 on a topic related to the ocean, to declare it on the QR code that you're going to see in a few seconds, so that we understand, we have the data, we have the knowledge, and we're able to understand how much capital is going to get deployed over the next years, to know if we're on track or not, and then to be able to connect that with concrete projects.
That's fascinating. Just before I open it up to questions, I had one listening to you both. It's fascinating. I can see how a gathering like this one, ChangeNOW, the gathering that you talk about in Monaco, the one that will follow in Nice, are crucial to gathering together all the stakeholders. But we're talking about very specific initiatives that will make a concrete difference, and that is good. Have we given up asking governments for binding agreements? Is that no longer what we expect or need?
Thank you for the question. We have a triangle of priorities for the conference. It's very simple.
Okay.
On the tip of the triangle is our responsibility as governments. It's ocean governance. And ocean governance, you spoke about this coalition. I think it's DANIELA who spoke about this coalition of mayors and governors. That's governance, that's local governance. That is also the countries.
Crucial.
It is crucial, it's at the top of the priorities because you need governance for impact. That's why But the governance needs science, and that's the second part of the triangle. That's the reason why we're organizing, just before the Monaco Blue Economy and Finance Forum, this conference of scientists. 2,000 scientists brought together are going to work hard for 3 days and come out with recommendations, not only resolutions, and concrete tools like the digital twin for the ocean, which is financed by the EU and which is going to be launched in Nice. And the other tip of the triangle is blue economy and finance. So that's it. We're not removing our responsibility as countries, as member states of the UN. If I may, there's just three priorities that I would like to define as far as our responsibility is concerned regarding binding treaties. We are in this race for ratifying the High Seas Treaty, which has been signed last September 23. We need 60 countries to ratify. France has ratified. There's like more than 30 now who are ratifying. We still need 30 countries. I know there's not many member states in the room, but you are, I think, and every one of us, we are voices in front of our governments. We need 60 countries to ratify this High Seas Treaty, because that is 65% of the ocean, and which is the majority of the ocean, and which today belongs to no one, and which is not regulated. And again, there is a boulevard of opportunities for economy, for investors, for science, for health in this ocean, which can be governed in common. That's a common good. The second one is fisheries. There is this treaty on Fish 1, Fish 2 at l'Organisation Mondiale du Commerce. World
Trade,
WTO. Thank you. In Geneva, where there is this binding treaty to remove the illegal and unreported fishing and the subsidies of governments, which goes to these illegal and unreported fisheries, and which is something which is very high in the agenda of countries like France or the EU. And the third one would be on this 30 by 30 agreement. That means the Kunming-Montreal Agreement, which has given a framework for biodiversity and to reach the target in 2030 of 30% of marine protected areas in the world. And as Daniela reminded us, we are just at 8%, because there's still a lot of work to do. And even in countries like ours, France, where we have reached the 30% of marine protected areas, there's still a lot of work to do in the level of protection in these oceans. And it is, as you know, Melissa, under attack. The marine protected areas, which are like Central Park in New York, just parks for regeneration of nature and the reconciliation between humans and nature and the species. I just want to say one last word, if you allow me.
Please.
Is we want to reconcile protection with prosperity. There is not a contradiction between preserving, protecting, regenerating, and making use of the resources of the ocean for humanity. It's just a way of getting there, which is the work of everyone, which is the work of the countries, which is the work of the scientists to help decisions to be made, and it's the work also of investors and corporates to take this into account in their way of creating growth and value.
But listening to you, there is actually a lot of ambition and a lot of hope there in the weeks and months ahead on all of the fronts that you mentioned. I wonder if there are questions from the audience for either Kevin or Ashok on any of these issues.
All is clear.
No, apparently you've been very clear then.
Well, the plan now is...
I am impressed, though, by everything we've just heard from Ashok and Kevin. Maybe give me your view. There are a lot of very concrete actions and very ambitious proposals that are on the table. And whilst, as Daniela said earlier, maybe the ocean hasn't had the kind of consideration it deserved, there's a lot that's being done and there's a lot of hope out there, however great the urgency.
Sorry.
There's a lot of hope in what Ashok just had to say, in very tangible agreements that could be reached in the next few months. So you are hopeful as well?
I am, and I will be even more when we're able actually to start tracking those commitments. So the idea is that today, this is the kickoff, and between now and actually June 7th, we will be able to gather all the commitments from our networks. And I mean, there was supposed to be a QR code to show you, but we will share it with all the investors and the philanthropists that are part. Oh, there it is. If you want to scan the QR code here, if you are a philanthropist or an investor, please, I invite you to scan this code and declare your intentions, your commitments. And on June 7th in Monaco, we'll be able to share the amount that have been committed. And it's the first step, and this is a work that we're going to be continuing over the years to come. And you can count on us to connect those commitments with concrete solutions and to play the role of a bridge. Thank you for your support, and thank you for being here again.
And maybe the last word then to you, Ashok. I know that you've mentioned these agreements, these talks, these hopes, these plans. It's interesting because the world is kind of going not in a sense of multilateralism or more awareness of the urgency of these issues. It's fascinating to hear that so much is being done behind the scenes and how hopeful you are. What is your last message then on the question of the oceans, even as we look ahead to this conference? Can it be addressed?
Yes, as we are celebrating, I don't know if we can still celebrate, but we have to stand firm with the Paris Agreement for climate. And
renew the determination, right?
Yes, this is the place for it, ChangeNOW at the Grand Palais. We are hoping to come out from Nice with the Nice agreements for the ocean. And that's the ambition. With all few of the examples I have given you, and with this way of bringing together governance, science, and economy and finance in a multi-stakeholder approach. The result will be the Nice Ocean Action Plan. That's in our modality resolution. That's in the UN language. And we hope that this plan would then be implemented. I was listening to Dr. Sylvia Earle in the movie, and she said there's only 5 years to change the tide or not. That's the sense, more than hope, the sense of urgency in all our activities. And I wanted to mention, Melissa, that we need all the stakeholders, and the stakeholders are the governance, the countries, the member states, the scientists, the corporates, the financiers, the NGOs, of course, very important, but also the media. And I'm speaking to you. But you're doing a great job at CNN, of course. You have this vision. Which
otherwise occupied right now.
No.
On the whole.
And many of you in the media, but we need more. It's not us. It's this question of standing firm in what creates a future for humanity.
And Ashok, the beginning of this conversation was 2030, the sustainable goals that in 2015 had elicited all this enthusiasm and all this hope, and the ocean was, I believe, number 14. Is it your belief that these next conferences, Monaco, Nice, will allow us to reach what was a very ambitious goal in 2015 and is actually 5 years away? It can still be done.
What happened 10 years ago was designing a trajectory, and because we can visualize that trajectory, we know that we are not respecting that trajectory. We hope to come out with Nice with the same kind of a trajectory that would be with metrics, with indicators, that the world would come together on. And the first thing I would say, the conference would be a success if we get these 60 countries to ratify the High Seas Treaty, because that would launch the first COP, the COP1 of the ocean 2 or 3 years later, and that would help then the world, all the countries of the world, to agree or disagree, but at least to see the trajectory. And that's very important, and that's our job as framers, as diplomats, as like you, that's what you're doing as well, an assemblier, bringing the stakeholders together to define in common our future.
Ashok, Kevin, thank you so much for that fascinating conversation and note of optimism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.